as we talked about last week, right? We talked about the issue of Sodom and Amorah, that they were destroyed. So now the aftermath of this episode occurs now. What happens? That after Avram Avinu he heard, right, that what happened over there. Obviously, he knew that the cities were destroyed. He saw the smoke going up, as the pasuk says, right, that you could see everything was visible. But besides the fact that he saw, he also had a problem because of this. What was the problem? This created a problem. He was dwelling there close to Sodom and Amorah. Why? What's the reason why? Why did he want to be close to there? Because this was giving him his livelihood, his business. What does that mean? I'm not talking about money, right? When I mean livelihood and business, I'm talking about his enterprise, his chesed enterprise. The fact that he did kindness to people, invited them in to eat and all these things, and to teach them Torah, to teach them mitzvot. How was he doing that? Because people were passing by. There was a metropolis over there, Sodom and Amorah, 4 cities. All this metropolis was providing for him his customers, right? What does it mean customers? Not for business, for kiruv, to teach them Torah. So because of that, since this was providing him his livelihood, his mitzvah livelihood. So once the cities were destroyed, it stopped. There was nobody passing by there anymore. The traffic subsided. So what happened was that now he had to go somewhere else because he wanted to continue doing his operation. His operation was what? To invite people in, to teach them all these things, to mezaket rabim, to do achnasat orchim. The only way he could do that is if you have people passing by. So that's why once those cities were destroyed, he had to move to a different location. That's what happened, right? He had to change location. There's also another opinion which says that the reason why he moved, there was also a different problem. The problem was that the word got out. What happened with the Lot and his daughters, what they did over there in the cave. They found out about it. By the way, the question is, you might ask, how did they find out? There was only 3 people there, right? So what happened was that probably the girls told the people, whatever. There was, you know how it is. The ladies, they like to talk. So the word gets out, and that's what happened. So once the word got out, what happened over there, so Avraham Avinu was very embarrassed by that. For him, it was a disgrace to have a family member, a nephew, to do such a thing like this, with his daughters, whatever. So because of that, what he did was he moved because of the embarrassment, because of the shame that occurred. So because of those 2 reasons, Avraham Avinu had to move to a different location. So where did he go? He had to go, he could have gone anywhere he wanted pretty much, more or less, but he went to a place called Gerar, right? Which is the place of the Pelishtim, the Philistines. So over there was a king called Avimelech. And once Avraham Avinu went to that place, he had an issue that he had to deal with over there. What was the issue? The issue was that when he gets there, what happens is that they start asking him all kinds of questions, about his wife. Again, his wife was very beautiful, whatever, so they started to ask him, who is this? This is your wife? This is your sister? Who is this? They were interested in her. So all of a sudden they're asking all kinds of questions. So once he saw that they were asking these questions, he realized that there was a danger involved over here. Why? Because they may kill him because of his wife, and take his wife, whatever. So he realized that the only way to guard himself would be to, make up the same story again, the way he did with Paro. Just like he said to Paro over there in Mitzrayim, he told them, this is my sister. So he said the same thing also over here. That's what happened. So, but it had the same result, which was what? That, Avimelech took the king took his wife, and thinking that this was his sister, so he wanted to marry her. It's a beautiful lady like this. It's fitting for Malchut, fitting for a king. So because of that, he wanted to marry her. And due to this, what happens again? She gets kidnapped again. Sarah Imenu, right? Same situation where she has to now, be alone over there with this king, and she doesn't know how to get out, and this is a very dangerous situation. So because of all these reasons, he had to lie again, right, and say this was his sister. But what happened was that once she was taken, so Kadosh Baruch Hu came to Avimelech, who was the king over there. He comes to him at night in a dream, right, through an angel, intermediary an angel, And the angel tells him, listen, this woman you took, she's a married woman. And she's married to this Navi, this prophet over here, Avraham. And you better be careful, because if you touch her, you're going to die. That's what the angel tells him. So Avimelech was upset about this whole thing. Why was he upset? Because, Avimelech was interesting character, by the way. He's a character of Avimelech, you have to understand. That they say, the Chazal, that Avimelech was a person who kept halakha, the rules of God. He kept them. He was a man who was God-fearing, in a sense, in a certain respect. He was God-fearing in a certain respect. So what happened was that because of that, if he would have known that she was a married woman, he wouldn't have taken her, because he didn't want to do sin. Avimelech, he wasn't interested in doing any sins. He wanted to keep the rules of God, the 7 mitzvot, right, that the Bnei Noach were commanded. He wanted to keep them. He didn't want to be Jewish either, He didn't want to be, like Avraham Avinu. He wasn't that much of a tzaddik, but he wanted to keep the basic rules of the Torah, of the 7 mitzvot. So therefore, what happened was...
So it's included in 10, right? Or it's different?
Yeah, pretty much it is, but the only difference is that for sure all the mitzvot that they have, we also have. But it's not really the 10 commandments though, all the mitzvot that they have, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit different, but anyway, the bottom line is that in our Torah, we have all the mitzvot that they have, but even more than that, right? Meaning what? That their mitzvah is different than ours. Sometimes, it's less inclusive, it's less stringent than our mitzvah. There is one case actually that their mitzvah is more stringent than ours. There is one case, one mitzvah, that they have to do more than we do in one area, right? That's, what is that? Ever min achai, right? What does that mean? That when a person eats a animal before slaughtering it, while it's still alive, he cuts off a limb, right? And the animal's still alive, so he's not allowed to eat that limb, right? So the goyim also have this isur. They also have prohibition of ever min achai. But their prohibition is even greater than ours. What does that mean? That means that when it comes to them, if a person took ever min achai, if he takes the limb off the animal, so he can't eat that even all the while the animal is alive, until the animal has been killed. He can't eat that. But when it comes to the Jews, once he did the shechita, right? He did shechita, he did the ritual slaughter, even though the animal is still alive, the Jew is still allowed to eat that already. But the goy is not allowed to eat that. That's the difference, right? So meaning what then? In that case, the goy has more of a mitzvah in ever min achai than the Jew does. But in most other cases, though, we have more mitzvah than they do. Meaning what? That we have more details, we have more stringencies, we have more rules, we have more regulations, we have more decrees, we have all kinds of things. Usually much more than they do. But anyway, the point is that now Avimelech, who wants to keep the rules of God, he doesn't want to be with a married woman. He didn't know that she was married. So what happened was that after he saw this dream, from the angel, so what happened was that he got very upset. Why did he get upset? Because, he blamed who? Who did he blame over here? First of all, he blamed God. What does that mean, blame God? That means that he told them like this. He said, listen, what's going on over here? I mean, I took this woman innocently. I didn't know she was married, And now you're telling me, he speaks like this to God, Now you're telling me what? I'm going to die. What am I going to die for? What? I didn't do it on purpose. So how are you going to tell me that I'm going to die? So, meaning what? That he was complaining to say what? That, it's not fair the way you treat me. He was complaining to God and saying, come on, I didn't do it on purpose. So why are you telling me I'm going to die? He didn't accept that. He said, you know what? You're killing me unjustly if that's the case. It's not fair. Not only that, he says, but he goes back in history and he says, this is what you did also to the generation of the flood, the generation of the dispersion. Also over there, you killed them without any real cause, unjustly. So now you have to understand. On the one hand, we're saying what? That Avimelech was a tzaddik, right? But if it's a tzaddik, how does he behave like this? How does he speak to God like that? How does he think thoughts like that about God? So the answer is that there's a big difference between a goy and a Jew, right? When it comes to being a tzaddik. Meaning what? That sometimes you have a goy also who keeps the mitzvot. He wants to be tzaddik. But the difference is that when you have a goy who keeps the mitzvot, he has a different attitude towards God. In other words, he knows that he has to keep the mitzvot, right? He knows that if he doesn't, he's going to be in trouble. But it's a different attitude. What does that mean? Hostile, rebellious attitude. Like he was over here. Meaning what? He's not saying, listen, if you really insist, I won't touch her and this and that, you're right, everything is what you say is right. How can you say that to God you're wrong? How can you say such a thing like that? But that's what he was saying. He was saying, you're wrong and I'm right. So what does that mean? That even though the goy sometimes knows that he has to be tzaddik, he has to keep the rules of God. Many goyim, they know that. But what they do is they have a hostile attitude though, very belligerent, hostile attitude. They say to God, we have no choice. We'll keep your laws, but it doesn't give you the right to do what you do. The things that you do, some of those things are wrong. That's what the attitude of the goy is like that. That's the difference between the Jew and the goy. That what the Jew accepts the rules of God with love. That's why when the Jews accepted the Torah, they said Na'aseh v'nishma, right? What does that mean? That we'll accept everything it says. We don't even know what it says, but we'll accept it anyway because we love Hashem, we love His ways, and we know everything He does is correct. Everything He does is proper. Everything He does is kosher. So if that's the case, we don't have to check it. We know that it's going to be good. But the goy, he says no. Goy doesn't say like that. Goy says, let me see what's in there first, and if it's good for me, then I'll accept it. If not, I won't accept it. That's exactly what happened, right? So the attitude of the goy is different than the attitude of the Jew. Even though sometimes the goy is righteous, but still, he doesn't have the intelligence, the attitude, the proper attitude to what? To know that God is divine. And His decrees, His wisdom, His approach to everything is much more grand, much more great than His own. I mean, the person has to understand one thing, right? This is the lack of understanding. That a person thinks sometimes, it's unfair the way I'm being treated in this world. I get bad breaks, I get a raw deal everywhere. It's not fair. So a person but who really understands what is God and what is He. He has to understand, right? Who created him? God created him. So how can it be, right, that the manufacturer, He manufactured you, He created you, and you're telling Him, right, that He's wrong? What I'm saying? Doesn't make any sense, you know what I mean? If He created you, if He had the wisdom to create you, so certainly what He's doing is not wrong. He knows what's the best for you. Who really knows what's best for a person, for any creation? The manufacturer, the one who created it, right? If he doesn't know, then nobody knows. So how can it be that you know better than him? Yes, he should know. The person should have the wisdom, should have the basic, understanding to know that this attitude is ridiculous. But that was the problem with Avimelech, and this is also the problem, by the way, that we saw with Eov. That what? Eov also was a tzaddik, even more than Avimelech, right? Much more than Avimelech. Eov was a real tzaddik, perfect tzaddik, but still, because he was like a goy, so his attitude was, that when suffering comes to him, and things come to him which are not, convenient for him, and very difficult to bear, the pain is too difficult, the situation is too harsh, so then it starts to already complain again, the same thing, right? We see the complaining. Why complaining? Because you can't tolerate the decrees of God, and you think you're smarter, you think you're better. That's what Eov was saying, right? When Kadosh Baruch Hu struck Eov with all kinds of diseases. So what did he say? He says, I want God to come over here. Let Him come down, you sit next to me, and I'm going to argue with Him, and I'm going to beat Him in argument. I'm going to show Him that He's wrong. That's what he was saying. Can you imagine something like this, right? That a person has such a chutzpah, to say such a thing like this to the one who created him, God, who is a superior being, omnipresent, omnipotent, right? All these things, God is perfect being, and you're trying to teach him how to do and what to do, and God, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, just a matter of it's arrogance, so that's the attitude, right? That's the difference between the goy who's a tzaddik and the Jew who's a tzaddik, right? The goy who's a tzaddik, he knows that he has to keep the rules, but he does it like begrudgingly, because he has no choice. Like, okay, what can you do? If I don't keep it, I'm going to die. I'm going to get punished. But the Jew, it's more like what he loves. he loves God, he believes in God, he knows everything he does is perfect, and everything is just. So he justifies his decrees. Not only he just says, "Oh yeah, I'll keep them because I have no choice." You do have a choice, but the point is, right, that I know that he's right. Everything he says is right. Everything he says is just, and that's the difference between the attitude of Avimelech and the attitude of Avraham Avinu. Right? It's not the same thing, even though they're both called tzaddikim, technically speaking, quote unquote tzaddikim, but it's not the same kind of tzaddik. That's what it is, right? That's the idea. So let's go on. Right? It says like this. So what happened was that now HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avimelech, listen, you better let go of this lady. Let her go, because if you don't, you know what's going to be, right? You're going to die. So says Avimelech, but you know what? I'm afraid now, because I took this woman who's married and her husband is a prophet. So even if I do return her, he's not going to forgive me. He's going to think I did something with her, whatever. So he was still, hesitant about the whole issue, not how to solve the problem, because what happened was that once he took her Sarah Imenu, so the situation was that Kadosh Baruch Hu locked them up. He locked them up, right? Meaning what? That they couldn't live with their wives. The Avimelech and his subjects over there in the palace. They all were unable to perform, cohabitation with their wives because of the punishment. They were being punished. They kidnapped Sarah Imenu. So they were like everyone was locked up. They couldn't give birth or anything like that. There was no way to procreate. So what happened was that they realized that this was because of the sin that he took Sarah Imenu. So he tells Avimelech tells Hashem like this, right? Vayavo Elohim el Avimelech, and it says Avimelech lo karav elea ve'amar Adonai agoy gam tzadik ta'arog. So he says, you know what? As we said, right, that there's an attitude here, arrogance. Halohu amar li achotihi vehi gam hu hi amra achihu betom levavi uvnikiyon kapai asiti zot. Right. So he says that what? The Avimelech now argues with a God. Another thing, he says, you know what? I didn't really touch her at all. I mean, so I haven't really done any sin. So I don't deserve to die. So Kadosh Baruch Hu answers to Avimelech like this. He says, right, Vayomer elav Elohim b'chalom, gam anochi yadati ki betom levavecha asita zot, va'echsoch gam anochi otecha mechato li, al ken lo netaticha lingro eleha. So Kadosh Baruch Hu answers Avimelech like this, right? He says, listen, I understand that you're innocent. I know you didn't do this on purpose. But regarding the claim that you're saying, right, that you didn't touch her, that's not your prerogative to brag about that you didn't touch her, because you really wanted to touch her, but I prevented you from touching her, right? Meaning what? That there was here a decree over here, right? The angel was not allowing him to touch her, but he actually wanted to. So meaning what? That Kadosh Baruch Hu pointed that out. That what? That you wanted to touch her, so don't try to claim like you didn't touch her. The reason you didn't touch her because you couldn't touch her. But if you could, you would have. So that's not really a claim. That's what Kadosh Baruch Hu was telling Avimelech. Anyway, it goes on to say, "Ve'ata Hashem eshet aish ki navi hu v'itpalel ba'adecha ve'yeh ve'im enecha meshiv da mut ki temot tamut ata b'chol asher lach." So Kadosh Baruch Hu tells to Avimelech like this. He says, "Listen, don't worry about anything. Just let her go. Let her go back to her husband, okay? And regarding what you're worried about, that maybe her husband is going to suspect that you did something with her, don't worry about that. Why? Because he's a prophet, he's a Navi. So he knows that you didn't do nothing with her. He knows everything, what you did and what you didn't do. So therefore, he's not going to be angry at you. He's not going to hold it against you. And he's not only that, he's going to pray for you that you should be healed if you let her go. So don't worry about anything. Everything's going to be okay. That's what Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Avimelech. So Avimelech decides to let her go. He has no choice, obviously, right? Lets her go, and he goes back to Avraham Avinu. So once she goes back, Vayishkim Avimelech b'boker vayikra l'chol avadav v'yidaber et kol הדברים האלה באוזניהם ויראו ואנשים מאוד ויקרא אבימלך לאברהם ויאמר לו מה עשית לנו מה חטאתי לך כי הבאת עליי ועל ממלכתי חטא גדולה מעשה אשר לא יעשו עשית עמדי. So Avimelech now comes and asks right Avraham Avinu. He says, listen, what's the reason why you did this? You got me into trouble like this. You tricked me over here. You told me that it's your sister. You got me into trouble. Now, it's an embarrassment for me. It's a disgrace. Everybody's talking about it over here in the country. You brought me a big problem over here by doing this. Why did you do this to me? By telling me that this is your sister. So Avraham Avinu answers Avimelech, right? He says, listen, ויאמר אבימלך אל אברהם, מה ראית כי עשית את הדבר הזה? ויאמר אברהם, כי אמרתי, רק אין יראת אלוהים במקום הזה, והרגוני על דבר אשתי. So, he says what? Avraham Avinu says, listen, when I came here, I noticed that there's no fear of God in this place, that people are not God-fearing over here. So I was very worried that somebody's going to kill me over here. This is the reason why I lied. So the question is, how did he know that they're not God-fearing, Like, what tipped him off? Because nobody came to him with a knife, tried to stab him, nobody did that. So then what's the story? Why was he so worried about it? Right? But you have to ask also, by the way, another reason, which is that if he was so worried about, with Avimelech that something was going to happen over there, so why wasn't he worried in other places? In Hebron, he wasn't worried like that. So why Dafka was he worried in Gerar, right? In place of Avimelech? So the reason is that when he got there, the Chazal say, right, that people started to ask him about his wife, who is this, and they saw that she's beautiful, so they wanted her. So they're trying to do all kinds of tricks, to maybe to get her somehow. So once he noticed that, he realized that these people have no Yirat Shamayim. They're not God-fearing people, and they would do something drastic in order to get his wife. Maybe even kill him, right? Maybe even cause him harm. So because of all these reasons, he said to Abimelech, listen, once you start to talk to me about my wife, I realize something is wrong over here. Something is not kosher. And this is the reason why I lied. By the way, what does that mean? So explains over here Rashi from the Midrash that the reason is like this, right? That a person, when he comes to a new town, he doesn't live over there. He comes as a visitor, right? Like he's coming over here, or as an immigrant, right? So what do they first ask you? They ask you about you, what's going on with you, what's with you? So they don't start asking about his wife, I'm saying, about this woman who's traveling with him. So meaning what? That the fact that they had the chutzpah, they had the arrogance to ask about his wife. Who is this, and what is this, and why? Trying to pull off some trick to get her, stunts. He realized, right, that this was something is not kosher over here. And this is why he lied. Right? And also, he points out also another thing, right? Which is what? He says in the next pasuk, "V'gam amna achoti bat avihi, ach lo bat imi, v'tahini leisha." So says Abraham Avinu, listen, not only that I felt there was a danger over here, and therefore had no choice but to lie, but also there's another thing, which is what? That she really is my sister in a sense. What does that mean? How is she my sister? Because she's my niece, So niece is like a sister. How is that? What's the story? The story is, right, that she was the daughter of Haran, who was the brother of Abraham, right? Haran died, and so he married her. He took her. She was his niece. So what happened was that they all were the children of Terach, right? Haran and Abraham were the children of Terach. So, meaning what? That Sarah, his wife, was also like his sister. Why? Because they all came from one grandfather. So he said, right, in a sense, really, she's like my sister, my half-sister, half-sister. So, meaning what? He wants to say that I didn't really lie. What I said was actually somewhat true. That what? She is my sister. She's my relative. And by the way, there's also another thing, right? So, if that's the case, you have to ask a question, right? How is it that he married her then? Right? So the answer is that a goy, in those days they had the din of a goy, right? Not a din of a Jew. So a goy is allowed to marry his half sister. Meaning what? That if it's his sister only from the father's side, but not from the mother's side, so he is allowed to marry her, right? So therefore, yeah, right, exactly. Only if it's only from the father's side, not from the mother's side, so he's allowed to marry her. But a Jew is not allowed to do that, right? A goy is allowed to do it. When he married her, he was like a goy, Avraham Avinu. He didn't convert yet at that time, and there was also before Matan Torah. So therefore, right, what he did was really actually kosher. He took his niece to marry her. By the way, also in our days, a person is allowed to take his niece. Right? And according to Jewish law, a person is allowed to marry his niece.
From father's side.
even from his mother's side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that means to say that what do you call it? What I want to say, that a person is allowed to marry his niece. And not only that, they say the Chazal even more, right? The Talmud says it's a mitzvah to do so. Right? What does that mean? It's a mitzvah. That usually when a person marries his niece, the children turn out very good, very, 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 very pure.
Yeah.
Yes. Nowadays, by the way, we have a problem with that. The problem is that there's a medicinal issue. Sometimes the kids turn out to be deformed.
Yeah.
When you marry your cousin or whatever, all these things. So nowadays, a person who wants to marry his niece or cousin has to take a blood test. I'm sure you know about it, right? So if you take the test, it's okay. You can do it because according to halakha, it's allowed. You're allowed to marry your cousin. You're allowed to marry your niece. And that's the halakha. That's the way it is. So, but when it comes to a sister, a person is not allowed to marry his half sister. A Jewish person, half sister is not allowed to marry, but a goy is allowed to marry half sister. That's the difference, right? So what happened was like this, right? That Haran, even though it was a brother of Avraham, Haran was only the brother from the father's side, not from the mother's side. So meaning what? That Haran and Avraham, they didn't have the same mother. Terach had a different wife. That Haran was born from that wife, that different wife. So therefore, right, Haran and Avraham were only half brothers. That's what it is. That's why he told Avimelech that she really is my sister in the sense that what? That me and Haran were half brothers, so therefore she's really permitted to me. She would be permitted to me even if she was Haran's sister. She would be permitted to me. It would be permitted. So therefore that's the reason why he was allowed to take her. For all these reasons. So anyway, by the way, what do we learn from here? There's something important to learn from here, which is what? They say, right, that in the halakha, the Chazal say, that sometimes a person is allowed to lie. For certain reasons, right? In general, a person shouldn't lie. Right? Because it says in the Torah, "Midadvar sheker tirchak." Right? Stay away from, falsehood. That's what it says in the Torah. So meaning what? That in the general, a person should stay away from lies. But there are certain cases where it's allowed to lie. What's a certain cases? For instance, right? A person is allowed to lie for shalom. Right? Let's say there's a fight between two people, so he's allowed to lie to them something in order to make shalom between them. To say, right, that this guy really likes you, he doesn't really like him. But he says, he does like you, as he told me that he likes you, he loves you like a brother. Even though he doesn't really love him like a brother. But he's saying all these things in order to make peace between them. So in a case like that, he's allowed to lie. And there's also other reasons why he's allowed to lie, right? For instance, a person is allowed to lie in order to avoid having embarrassment for himself. Like, for instance, they ask him, right, a question, right? And if he would answer the truth, so it would cause him shame, this to answer this question, because it would be embarrassing. So in a case like that, we say that a person is allowed to lie in order to spare himself from embarrassment. That's right. But in general, though, a person is not allowed to lie, right? In general, there are some reasons why he is allowed to. But they say, right, that the Chazal say something interesting, that even though the Torah gave you permission to lie in certain cases, but even in those cases, you should try to say as much truth as possible. In other words, don't lie too much. Only what you need to lie. But don't lie more than that, because that's not allowed. So why am I telling you this? This is the reason why Avraham Avinu pointed out this to Avimelech. What did he tell him? He said, listen, I did lie, but it wasn't totally a lie what I said, because really she is my half-sister. She is my relative. So therefore, it wasn't totally a lie. It was somewhat true there. So you shouldn't think it's a total lie what I said. It's not true. It's not a total lie. That's what I tried to tell him, right? I didn't lie too much. I just lied enough to save my life, but not more than that. Okay, so let's go on. So it says, "Vahi kasher hitu oti Elohim bebet avi ve'omar la ze chastech asher ta'asi imadi v'kol hamakom asher navo shama imi li achihu." So he says, what? I've been doing this already for a while. That tells Avimelech, right? That what? Not the first time I did this already. Every time I go to a place where I feel it's dangerous over there, and I feel they're going to kill me because of her, so I pull this trick, in order to save my life, so I shouldn't be killed. That's the reason why I do it. I don't do it just for fun. It's not a game. So I'm trying to explain to him what happened over here. So Avimelech, he understood what he told him. But nevertheless, Avimelech was angry at this situation. Right? I mean, what? He has a claim on Avram. He's saying like this, what is this business? You're telling me that this is your sister. You caused me so much trouble, so much hardship. You caused me to be punished like this. Embarrassed, disgraced, in front of everybody like this. The whole kingdom is disgracing me. That's what he. So Avimelech was angry. So what do I care that Avimelech was angry? What's enough kamina? What's the practical difference? The practical difference is that what? Now all of a sudden, right? What does Avimelech say? Avimelech hine atzi lefanecha batov b'einecha shev u'sara amar hine natati lecha 1,000 kesef leachich hine hu lach kesut einayim lechol asher itach ve'et kol nochachad. So he says, you know what? Avimelech says, not only am I going to release you to go back to your husband, but also I'm going to give you gifts, and money. Why? Why did he do that? First of all, he wanted to appease Abraham, because he wanted him to pray for him, that he should recover from his illness, this illness that they had. They couldn't be with their wives, they couldn't live with their wives, so he wanted to recover from that. So therefore, he wanted to appease Abraham, so by giving him, money and gifts, whatever. This was one of the reasons why he did that. But also there's another reason, right? The Chazal say, that this whole thing, this whole episode became a scandal in his kingdom. Everybody was talking about it, the gossiping, they were always gossiping, this, that, everywhere. So what happened was that everybody knew that now he had to let her go, because this was a mistake and everything, all this. So therefore what? That the problem was that people may think now, since he took her, for sure, he probably lived with her, he probably touched her, he probably had relations with her. So therefore, the reason why Avimelech gave her the money and the gifts was to prove that what? That he didn't touch her. What does that mean? That he had to, in other words, since he had to do all this effort to appease her and her husband, people would understand, right, that he didn't do anything with her. He was innocent in this whole episode, and she also was not touched by him. So therefore, everybody would know, right, since he had to go make such a big effort to appease her and him, everybody would know that there was nothing there, right? Nothing happened between them, and there was no contact, there was no relations, there was nothing over there. And so all this he did in order to for these purposes, but also, right, the Chazal say, right, that he made over here a curse a little bit. He cursed them. Why? Because as we said, right, he was angry about this whole episode, what they did to him, and causing him this shame and embarrassment and disgrace. So therefore, what he did was, he said, right, that he said, these gifts and this money that I'm giving you, it's like covering for the eyes. Right? What does that mean, covering for the eyes? That meaning what? That you shouldn't have to be ashamed of anything. That you're going out, right, with no shame, with pride, from me. Like there's no embarrassment for you or nothing. But really, right, what happened was that he said covering of the eyes. So this was an allusion to a curse, right? They say, right? He cursed them. What does that mean? That he cursed them that they shouldn't be able to see, blindness, whatever. This is what it means, covering of the eyes. So this is the reason they say, right, that when they got older, right, when Yitzchak got older, that he was blind, he couldn't see. So they say the reason was because of the curse that Avimelech made on them. This is the reason why he had blindness, right? So you see from there that the curse that he made actually came true, because they caused him so much hardship. So he cursed them, like that. And even though it didn't come true right away, it came true, many years later on, when Yitzchak got old. This was, we're talking about 180 years later, but still, there was a curse there, and it came true. So they say, right, that when a person curses or blesses, it shouldn't be light in your eyes, this thing. Because it can come true, many of these things, especially if he has some justification to what he's saying. Even though the person is not a big chacham or is not a big tzaddik, whatever, he can be just a regular guy. But even though he's a regular guy, if he curses somebody or whatever, or he blesses, these things, many times often come true. These things. So therefore, a person shouldn't think, it's nothing. This guy is not important. So whatever he says, nothing is going to happen. You shouldn't think nothing is going to happen. Something may very well happen. Right? And this is exactly the case that we prove over here, that even though Avimelech was not really much of a big chacham or tzaddik, compared to Avraham Avinu, he was not really much. But the point is, it's still because he had some justification to his his claim over here. So therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu, right, did make his curse come true in some sense, even though it was very, very far into the future. It's interesting. So this is what happened, right? So it goes on to say that what? ויתפלל אברהם אל האלוהים, וירפא אלוהים את אבימלך ואת אשתו, ואמותיו וילדו. So now he says, right, once Avraham Avinu prayed, once he let her go, so Avraham Avinu started to pray for him, that what? That this disease that they had, they couldn't be with their wives. Now all of a sudden, right, it was lifted, and they were able to be with their wives and have children and bear children. Everything went back to normal. So everything, was reinstated the way it should be, and nothing, no harm was really done over here, in a permanent sense. But it was a very, uncomfortable situation, right, for everybody. Obviously, all this, this episode. כי עצר אדוני בעד כל רחם לבית אבימלך ועל דבר שרה אשת אברהם. So it says that what? That the reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu opened up the wombs of the women in the palace of Avimelech was because while Sarah Imenu was imprisoned over there, right, kidnapped over there, nobody was able to have children and be with their wives at that time, right? Until this matter was taken care of, right? Nothing. They couldn't do anything about procreating or having children and so forth and so on. So this is exactly what happened, right? So what happened was that in the end, everything went back to normal, Baruch Hashem. But they say, right, that there's a difference though here between the behavior of Avimelech and Paro, right? Because really, as we mentioned before, right, Paro also had a similar episode with Avraham Avinu. Told him that this is my sister, and he took her, his wife, and so forth, and he had to let her go. But there were some differences between the situation with Paro and the situation with Avimelech. What's the difference? We find that Paro, right, first of all, when he took Sarah Imenu to be his wife, so Hashem didn't come to Paro and speak with him like he did to Avimelech. So Ibn Ezra points out that there's a reason for that, right? Why? Because as we said, right, that relatively speaking, Avimelech was somewhat of a tzaddik, right? He kept the rules of God. He was a God-fearing person, and because of that, he was better than Paro. Paro was not a God-fearing person. Paro was a big rasha, idolater, right? Egyptians at that time were very corrupted people. Today, by the way, it's not those Egyptians that they have today, right? Today it's a different country over there, it's a different nation, different people, right? The ancient Egyptians were different people altogether.
Like more Caucasian people, let's say. Like white type. Yeah,
you're more right, more light, and more intelligent, more smart. These were like people who were very, very intelligent, very smart, very advanced people. They were a very advanced culture they had over there. It was a superpower of the world, just like America today. So what happened was that Paro, the first thing you see that Hashem didn't come to him to. So why is that? Because we said, right, he wasn't a tzaddik like Avimelech. So meaning what? That he didn't deserve that Hashem should come to him, and speak to him like the situation of Avimelech. It was a different situation over there. So therefore, at Avimelech he came, Paro he didn't come. That's one difference, right, between Paro and Avimelech. Also, you find another thing, which is what? That when Paro found out, right, that this was Abraham's wife. So what happened was that he let them go, but he asked them to leave Mitzrayim. But here we find what Avimelech didn't ask them to leave. He said, "You could stay here if you want." Once the situation was corrected and everything went back to normal, he said, "Listen, just take a place over here. You can take any place you want to live and live there. No problem. I have no problem with you being here. I'm not throwing you out." But Paro threw them out. He escorted them. He had the officers, escort them out of there. He didn't want them there. And so what's the difference between the case of Paro and the case of Avimelech? So they say, right, that Paro knew that his people, the Mitzrim, the Egyptians, were the most depraved people, right? Sexually very, depraved. So therefore he knew that leaving them over there was a very big danger. Why? Because something could happen. Somebody could rape her or whatever, These people were like very dangerous over there. They had no Yirat Shamayim whatsoever in Mitzrayim. They were on a much lower level spiritually. So therefore, Paro knew that his populace cannot be trusted. So therefore what he did was he just escorted them out. He said, "Get out of here, Don't stay here, because if you do, I'm going to get into trouble, because I have to protect you. And I may not be able to. I can't protect you at 24 hours a day. Something may happen, you never know what's going to be. So I don't want to take the responsibility for that. So therefore he asked them to leave. That's what happened, right? But Avimelech, right? The populace over there in his place in Gerar was not so bad like in Mitzrayim. So meaning what? That once Avimelech commanded to the populace over there, he told them like this. He said, he announces, right? As the pasuk says over here, that what? He told his people. He made an announcement, right? State of the Union address, right? Like it's going to be tonight over here, Trump, right? So it comes out and says, if anybody touches these two people, they're going to die, right? He warned them. So meaning what? Don't touch them. These people are protected by me. You have no business with them. Don't play around with these people. So therefore, once he did that, he knew that his people were going to listen to him, his populace, right? His people were more moral. They had more morality, even though they really were not so moral, but they, compared to the Mitzrayim, so they were much more moral than the Mitzrayim. So therefore, Avimelech had no problem that Avraham Avinu should stay there, and hang around there. Just the opposite, right? He felt that it was actually a good thing, right? Because, as we already spoke about that, right? I don't know if we spoke about it here, but they say, right? Says the Zohar Kadosh, something amazing, right? That when the Jews go to a certain country, right? Non-Jewish country, Goyish country. So what happens is that every country, every nation has a heavenly prince in Shemaim, some angel that conducts the affairs of the country, protects them, and gives them all their needs, and so forth, so on. So that's their Tsar, right? That's their prince. That's their heavenly prince. So what happens is like this, right? That each nation has one of those. So when Jews come to that country and they live there in that country, so it says in the Zohar that comes the Shekhinah, right? The Shekhinah, the holy divine presence, comes and gives like a hug to that prince, that heavenly prince in Shemaim. So when the Shekhinah gives a hug, so that nation gets a bracha, a big bracha from that, right? They get the bracha of holiness. The holiness is attached, they become attached to holiness because of the presence of the Jews there. So that nation gets blessing, abundance, success, right? It becomes like a superpower. And this is exactly, by the way, why Paro didn't want to let the Jews go, right? When he was so stubborn about it, right? 10 plagues, and still doesn't want to let them go. 9 plagues, doesn't want to let them go. And then again, he wants to go chase after them in the sea, right? As we saw last week in the Parashat Shavua. Why Paro wanted so much that they should stay there? What does he care so much? Egypt was already destroyed from all the plagues, and still he wants to chase after them. What do you want to chase after them for? Because he knew that the blessing of Mitzrayim that became a superpower is because of the zchut of the Jews. And if the Jews are leaving, so they're going to lose that zchut. That's it, no more. So therefore, he wanted to get them back. So this is exactly why Avimelech had no problem to leave the Avraham Avinu there, because he knew, right, by having him there, it was going to cause him blessing. So therefore, right, he tells them, no problem, stay here, we'll protect you, we'll give you good conditions over here, we have no problems with you. Right, so he leaves them over there, and okay, so I guess we'll stop here. Chazak u'baruch.
Thank you very much.
I did one parak,